Hello everybody, welcome to the World of Max, where we do a bunch of crazy shenanigans. I'm tired, hence why my window isn't closed, my bed isn't made, and I don't have a jacket on. So, I want to do something easy. So today we're going to be reading more of Dreams Come to Life, Bendy and the Ink Machine. So with that being said, let's get started. Okay, in the last episode, in the last part, we read one chapter which took 30 minutes. So we're going to read chapter 2 and see how long that is. But first, I gotta go get something to drink. Whoa! Okay. Smile. I got tangerine juice today. Okay. This is Bendy. At the time, the introduction to a two-dimensional drawing had been kind of, well, I guess, cute. Though cute wasn't exactly a word I'd used too much in my day-to-day existence. But yeah, sure, cute. Nice to meet you, fictional character. But now, trying to explain to you what I understand about that moment, what I now know compared to what I knew then. I didn't know, for example, that when Mr. Drew smiled, you had to look close at his eyes to look for a small crinkle in the corner. Every artist knows that crinkle. It makes for a more authentic-looking smile. But I wasn't really an artist yet. Not then. I didn't know what was missing. I didn't know either that an introduction could have so much meaning. That at a party, the way someone shook your hand or said their name, or even the way Mr. Drew introduced me to people, I didn't know then that it was all a kind of code. Something to decipher. I'd wish I'd known right then that Mr. Drew had been waiting for a realization from me. Something to click inside and all come together. Watching me carefully. Hi there, Bendy, I'd said, playing along. Mr. Drew laughed and put the picture down. So, you really don't know him, do you? He asked. I shook my head. No, because I didn't. That's unfortunate, said Mr. Drew, but more to himself than to me. That much I recognized, so I didn't say anything. The thing is, Mr. Drew thought I should know who Bendy was, and I bet a lot of folks would ask themselves the same thing. Why didn't I know? After all, he was in those little short movies before the feature-length movie. There he was on soup cans. The little devil sold war bonds, for crying out loud. I know. And it's not like I hadn't seen him before. Like I wrote earlier, I did have this feeling of recognition. So it wasn't that. It's just, when you're on the Lower East Side, growing up, going to school, then dropping out to make money, when your experience of movies is Don Miller holding open the back door of the cinema for you, you just don't see cartoons as much as the average kid. If Bendy was still running a comic strip by the time I started drawing, that would have been different. Those were my whole world. It wasn't anyone's fault. It was being poor's fault. It was trying to do right. What the frick? It was trying to do right by my ma and working 12 hours a day. And let's be honest here, those cartoons weren't exactly popular in the way they had been. I was barely in the world when the Bendy tunes were all the rage. So the little devil wasn't a big deal. He didn't represent anything. He didn't mean anything. Except he meant everything to Mr. Drew. This is my point. This is my whole point, he said, standing up and pacing about the room. He still wasn't talking to me, but he was talking louder, and I couldn't just ignore it now. Sorry, sir, what's your point? I asked. He looked at me, but kept pacing. What is this studio coming to? What have we come to that a kid your age doesn't know Bendy? This is my point. This is why. He still wasn't making much sense. It was kind of crazy that a few sentences that made sense could still sound like total nonsense. You like that, Dot? I know you like that kind of stuff. That funny wordplay stuff. I hope I'm making you proud. I hope you read this. I hope you're alive. Where was I? Right. Oh, okay, I said. I didn't know what else to say at this point. There was a silence. Shut up. He stopped pacing. I stopped talking. And then he clapped his hands together loudly, sharply. The sound made me jump in my seat. It was like a gunshot. I nearly ducked. This has always stayed with me. Of all the memories that are getting mixed up a bit in here, in this brain, in this head, this for some reason just sticks out. Right then, when he clapped, the lights came back on. It was like they were waiting for him. It was like he was in control of them. He wasn't. But I made that connection back then. Somehow, it made sense to me that maybe, just maybe, he had the power to do all of that. He didn't, and he doesn't. Don't let anyone make you think he does. Mr. Drew noticed the light and laughed a "Ha!" Exactly how'd you spell it. Like that. Ha! He turned to me and he was smiling again. "Come on, kid. I'll give you a tour, kid." Why was there two kids there? I nodded, and all the strange thoughts I'd had in that short moment disappeared. I was excited now. I was getting a tour of a studio that made cartoons. I was going to meet other artists. This was not at all how I pictured my day when I woke up that morning. Great! I was up in a flash and following Mr. Drew out of his office and into the now brightly lit foyer. A woman was sitting behind the desk next to the door. She was compact looking, with jet black hair forming into perfect curls. "We're going for a tour, Miss Rodriguez," announced Mr. Drew as he passed her. "Tom's here," she replied, not looking up from her typewriter. Sure enough, there was a tall, broad man sitting in one of the chairs near the elevator. He had one leg, folded neatly over the other, holding his hat in his lap. Next to him was what looked like a yellow tool bag with the word "Gent" written on it. I glanced up at Mr. Drew and saw a smile flicker, kind of how lights do before they go out. Then it grew larger and he pointed at the man and said, "Tommy Cutter!" It wasn't a question. The man stood, picking up a long, narrow cardboard tube that had been sitting beside him on the chair. Mr. Drew noticed and pointed at the tube, but didn't say anything. Then he smiled bigger. Hold on, I gotta hear what Thomas Connor's voice sounds like, and do my best to remember it. What are you doing?
It's dark and it's cold. So we're looking at quite a job here. So it's like this. Okay, got it.
One second, please.
So it's like this. Yes, sir.
Said Tommy, even though there hadn't been a question.
It has.
What was?
Sorry about that, buddy. Gotta take this meeting. Big plans, kid. Big plans, said Mr. Drew. Come back first thing and we'll get you settled in.
He didn't look at me, but did give me a firm pat on the back as he extended his other arm toward his office.
Right this way, Tommy. Mr. Connor, replied Tom as he walked over.
Mr. Drew just laughed at that, though I didn't get the joke, and then went back into his office, closing the door behind them. I was alone then. I walked up to the secretary. She didn't look at me. I didn't expect her to at this point. I also didn't know what to say. What did he hire you for? Asked Mid Rodriguez. A gopher. Maybe an artist. He said I'd be in the art department. I wasn't so sure anymore what exactly my job was going to be. Miss Rodriguez stopped typing and leaned back, looking down at her desk. She pulled open a drawer and grabbed a thick envelope full of papers. Finally, she looked at me as she handed it my way. Fill these out, bring them with you tomorrow. Come by at 9 a.m. and check in with Miss Miller downstairs in the lobby. I took the paper and nodded. Thanks. Miss Rodriguez looked at me for a moment longer, like maybe she wanted to say something. But she didn't. She just went back to typing. I didn't go home right away. First I had to see Mr. Schwartz, let him know the delivery was made and Mr. Drew was pleased with the suit. Then I had to quit. Which, well, didn't go too great. But I didn't really care how red in the face Mr. Schwartz got, or how hard he pointed his finger at me. I was going to work tomorrow morning at Joey Drew Studios, and no one was going to stop me. The only thing that scared me was Mr. Schwartz might take it out on Ma, might fire her. But he didn't. Ma was too good. I wish sometimes she could just start a shop on her own. Well, maybe now. Maybe when I was earning enough. When I was paid, when I was a paid artist for Joey Drew Studios. I grinned at the thought. I wasn't ready to go home yet after that. I was buzzing with excitement. Wandered a bit through the neighborhood. Got a free donut from Miss Panek as she was closing up the deli. And the Jan Kowalski kids tried to get me to play stickball with them. I smiled and kept going and made it eventually to the East River as the sky was turning a dark purple. The lights were on in Brooklyn. They looked like stars across the river. I sat on a bench, almost in some pigeon crap, but I saw it last minute and jumped my bum to the side. The air was less stagnant by the water, and it was cooler now with the sun almost set. It made me feel kind of calmer than I had been. Everything's fine. Everything is perfectly normal. I don't... The air was less stagnant by the water, and it was cooler now with the sun almost set. It made me feel kind of calmer than I had been. The vibrating excitement of the day was now settling around me like a blanket. I still felt happy, but it all felt a lot more real. Sometimes things like that happen. I got home late. Real late. The hall light was on, which was nice of Ma, but I knew how to shut it off immediately behind me. Lighting bills get high, and then Ma has to work more. I hope now, with this new job, maybe lights wouldn't be as big of a problem. Maybe now she could sit up and read comfortably and not with a candle. I knew also I'd probably get some speech the next morning about being out so late. She'd like to know where I was. Like... Can I get the page? Like I was a kid or something. Well, it wasn't my fault for losing track of time. It had been a big day. I opened the door as slowly as I could. Ma slept on the daybed in the sitting area, right there by the entrance. It was all one space, the kitchen, where we ate, where we sat, and the door opened right onto all of it. She was curled up under the sheet, deep asleep, and I slipped out of my shoes, carrying them to my room. My room was never actually pitch black. It's funny, but up until this day, standing in the dark lobby of Joey Drew Studios, I had no idea that there could be different kinds of dark. It never occurred to me that the street lamp outside our windows made it possible for me to find my bed, toss my clothes into the corner, and crawl under the sheet in my shorts without crashing into everything. It had never occurred to me that it could be so black you couldn't even see your hand in front of your face. Back then, I hadn't known about that kind of dark. I threw the sheet off and lay on the bed for a moment, trying to get cool. I got up and opened the window a crack. There wasn't much of a difference in temperature, but there was something soothing about the hum of the city. I lay back down and closed my eyes. Sometimes you don't know you've fallen asleep. That's what happened then. I thought I was still awake, trying to fall asleep when I realized that I wasn't lying in bed anymore. Everything was still black, like when you close your eyes, but I was standing in it and my eyes were open. I was trying to see something, but it couldn't. So I walked forward into the blackness. There was something ahead of me. I could hear it. Something breathing, maybe? But for some reason, I didn't know if it was alive. I think I still thought I was awake at this point because I thought to myself, you don't have time for this, you have to sleep. But I kept going forward. Finally, I came to a door. It just kind of materialized in front of me. But I wasn't surprised. There was a knock coming from the other side. This made me take a step back. I felt like I shouldn't answer. I took another step back. Somehow the door was still right in front of me. There was a long silence. A giant hand burst through the wood, creating a shower of splinters. There was a roar as I stumbled back, but I couldn't get away. It kept grabbing at me, waving around, trying to find me. I woke up suddenly, face down in my pillow. The bottom sheet was drenched in sweat. My heart was in my throat. It was a dream, I told myself. A dream. I rolled over onto my back and stared at the slice of light from the street lamp as it highlighted the ceiling. There was that crack that ran across the corner in the plaster. Water damage. It had bled... Hold on. Okay. It had bled dark brown once upon a time, and the stain made it look a bit like the Hudson River. Dark, cold, filled with all kinds of who knows what. Why couldn't I shake the feeling I was being watched? I glanced to my right. A thin figure stood in my doorway. He glowed in the lamplight. A pale, gaunt face, paper-thin skin stretched over his skull, eyes wide and soulless. A long white nightshirt covered his skeletal frame. All I could do was stare, breathe, shake the dream out of my brain. He's not real. Wake up and he'll disappear. But I just kept standing there. He didn't move. He raised his hands slowly and pointed at me. That's when I just couldn't take it anymore. I closed my eyes and yelled. Maybe it was cowardly, but I couldn't move. I yelled again. My whole body was yelling. The lights buzzed on. The one over my bed did its threatening flicker. The wiring in the wall is damaged by the water leak above. Buddy, are you okay? Ma came charging into my room, struggling to pull her pale purple housecoat on even as the right sleeve was strapped into the belt. I'd normally laugh, but the terror was still in charge, especially as, even though the lights were now on and the dream long gone, the old man was still there, and he looked pretty much just as scary. I couldn't answer her, obviously. I couldn't make words. The figure turned to my mother. It took a step toward her. That helped me find my voice. "You stay away from her!" I called out, and leaped from my bed. My foot got caught in the hole at the bottom of the knit blanket draped at the edge of the bed, and I fell face first onto the floor. "My goodness, what's going on?" Ma said. I was reaching for anything to help pull myself up. I felt like a fool. I pushed myself onto my forearms. A bony hand extended toward me. "Up," said a rich, low voice with a thick accent I recognized all too well. I turned my head and stared at the man. His features still seemed too pale and too worn, but his eyes were a light blue and had a spark to them, no longer hollow. I reached out and took his hand. It was warm. I stood and stared at it. I stood and stared at him for a moment. We were about the same height. He was maybe an inch shorter. He seemed now more frail than terrifying. I looked at Ma. She'd managed to get her arm through the sleeve and was staring at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But on the other hand, who's the old guy? I asked, pointing just to make sure she knew what I was talking about, since she seemed so confused, and to me it didn't seem like a confusing situation. Ma closed her eyes for a moment and smiled. She sighed as she opened them again. The old guy is your... The old guy is your Zadie. I don't know, it just says Zaid. Oh, what the... My what now? Your grandfather, buddy. My father. The words caught in her throat a little bit. I looked at the old man. He didn't smile. He didn't say anything. Just stood staring in that way he had been, framed by the doorway. What's he doing here? Look, I'm taking him to bed. I'll come back and we can talk, she said. She murmured something to him in Polish, then he nodded. She took him by the crook of the arm and led him out of my room. I sat on my bed. It was the first time all day I finally felt tired. Not excited because of Mr. Drew, or terrified because of a person who was evidently my grandfather. Just very tired. Ma came back and sat next to me. She gave me that sort of sideways glance she was so good at. It meant she thought I was funny. It wasn't exactly her laughing at me, but it wasn't not laughing at me either. I'm sorry, I didn't know. How could I have known? I asked. It's okay, it's my fault. Everything happened so quickly. I didn't know he was coming today. I wasn't ready for him myself. At least I didn't put him in your bed. Imagine what kind of shock that would have been, she said with a laugh. My bed? You've got the big bed, buddy, and we're just going to have to make it work for a while. I sighed hard but didn't say anything. My mom was a nice, warm, kind of a person, but don't let that fool you. You didn't argue with her. You'd never win. When you didn't come home, I put him with me tonight. I didn't want to scare you. I guess that was nice of you, I said, feeling sorry for myself. Wasn't it? Said Ma with a wink. And where were you so late? You don't think of your poor mother at home, worried sick? I didn't think it was time for a change of subject yet. I still didn't have enough information. My grandfather from the old country was now here in my apartment in New York. And why? The why still hadn't been addressed. But it was late, and also the answer would make her happy. I got a job, I said, trying not to smile. Trying to make it a casual sort of thing, like I didn't really care that much. What about Mr. Schwartz? She asked, biting her lip. Don't worry, he didn't get mad. You still have your job, but I hope soon you won't have to work for him either. This job is better. It's working as an apprentice for Joey Drew Studios. Who knows where it could lead? You get paid for that? Of course, twice as much even. Ma smiled then, a small smile. Maybe I wasn't meant to even see it, but I could tell something in her head. I am going to kill this book. Burn it in a fire. Ma smiled then, a small smile. Maybe I wasn't meant to even see it, but I could tell something in her had relaxed, and that made me so proud. What's a Joey Drew studio? She asked, turning to face me, one knee up on the blanket. It's where they make cartoons, Bendy cartoons. I get to be a gopher, but also a drawing apprentice. Learn stuff. She looked at me funny then, but that wasn't unusual. She always looked at me funny. Like there was a whole story going on in her head that I'd never get to hear. Secrets. Secrets. Okay. I think I banged the book a little too hard because it blew up my whole entire. Okay. She looked at me funny then, but that wasn't unusual. She always looked at me funny. Like there was a whole story going on in her head that I'd never get to hear. Secrets. She smiled again. So you get to draw and get paid for it? It wasn't a question. Yeah. And your grandfather arrives the same day you get this job? Sure, I said. Perfect. She smiled. I didn't get the connection, and of course, she didn't explain it. I didn't ask either. It's funny. I'm just starting to realize how much I didn't ask questions back then. Not until I met you, Dot. Well, I'm happy for you, buddy. She leaned over and kissed my forehead. Made me feel like a little kid. Now get some sleep. We'll talk about everything tomorrow. That made me feel even more like a little kid. She left and turned out the light, and I crawled back under the covers, and only then did I remember my dream. I wondered how loud I'd been to make that old man wake up and come in. I wondered if I'd completely embarrassed myself in front of my creepy grandfather who looked like a ghost. What a strange day and night. If I'd had any kind of superstitious sense of anything, I might have seen it as a sign. Something beginning, something not quite right. But of course I didn't. I never saw the signs until I was past them. Down the dark road with no exit. Another metaphor. That one wasn't bad. Hey Dot, I'm getting better at this. Thank you everybody so much for watching. Make sure that subscribe button, notification bell so you're notified when future videos come out. It helps the channel grow and makes me happy. Okay, goodbye.